I'm going to talk about what the opportunities are for private consultants, crop consultants, people that work kind of at the retail level with producers, so how they can work with us and producers in conservation planning and the opportunities that are there. Like Greg said, I am from NRCS. I will do my best not to do the ABC regurgitation that we are all so good at and try to make this in such a way that you guys can understand. So how many people are familiar with NRCS and what NRCS? A lot of people, which is good, but you're going to hear it anyways from my perspective. But our slogan is we help people help the land through individual conservation planning on a voluntary basis. So we create site-specific conservation plans to address resource issues or resource concerns. And whenever I talk to a crowd or new individuals about what we do, I always feel I need to go back to the beginning, because so much of what we do has to do with where we began from. And I always start with the story of Hugh Bennett. And Hugh Bennett was a soil scientist that was doing soil mapping in North Carolina, South Carolina, kind of the Piedmont regions, the other side of the Appalachian Mountains. You know, at the time, we're talking the early 1900s. A lot of continuous low residue crops. Soil erosion was a severe issue. This is one of my favorite pictures, and I don't know if you can see it, but I believe, yeah, that's too complicated. But it's there in the middle. It's the same time frame from the southeast, but that's a gully. And that person standing there in the middle, I assume is a small child, but I'm not sure. But you can see that there is a 10, 20-foot gully, widening, head cutting, a severe issue. In the background, you can see the house. Think about the significance to that individual producer. A real resource concerns. They're making some attempts to control it, but we know that's probably not going to work. A real concrete issue to a real person. And Hugh Bennett was seeing all this when he was mapping his soils. And at the same time, back then, and really throughout our nation's history, we've always known that our ability to produce, to utilize our land was important. And if we ever lost that, that would have significant effects on the nation. So many years later, several years later, during the New Deal era, the Dust Bowl was going on. There's the picture of Washington, D.C. with the dust cloud. There was so much soil erosion going on in the West that it was blowing all the way to D.C. So as we all know, the story ends. That's how we were founded. We were founded under some really severe resource issues. That's where our roots are. And as part of that, kind of our forefathers implemented, laid forth what we call our 9 steps of planning. And I put it up here specifically as you as kind of independent crop consultants, just to think about what we do. Again, we work voluntarily with producers, but we're going to identify problems and opportunities. We're going to determine that objectives. You guys all know that every producer is different. We heard many good talks about working on farm studies, and there's challenges. People want to do different things. Obviously, if you're working with a young farmer, he's going to have different goals and be willing to do different things than maybe someone near the end of his career. So we consider where they're coming from and where they're going. We analyze the resources. We look at soil test data. We formulate alternatives. We evaluate those alternatives, and we ultimately help that producer make his decision. And then he implements his plan Then we evaluate that plan. And I'm sure that many of you as crop consultants has probably never seen our 9 steps of planning. But I hope that you find this to be somewhat familiar deep down, because I believe as crop consultants, this is what you're doing too. You realize that, yes, you may have your suite of products and services that you sell, but you realize that you got to customize it to that producer to make it work. And you help him make those evaluations, what's going to work best for him. You help him make a decision. You help him implement it. And then you evaluate what's going on. So what we do and what you do, although it may seem very different, is somewhat the same. The other brilliance, I believe, that has taken place and how we were founded in our beginnings is at the same time the legislation was allowed to create the conservation districts. We realized that we can't do what we do alone. You know, if you were in here earlier this morning, we heard several good presentations from ARS and Ohio State. We'll be talking, and it takes a group effort. And when you think about those Dust Bowl pictures, those pictures of that gully, that had to seem impossible. But we made it better because we all worked together. Not just us, the districts, the university, everybody. So that's what we're asking. Well, like the Dust Bowl times, I think we are facing that very significant issue here in the Western Lake Erie Basin. And I think by working together with these partnerships, including you as consultants, we can make things better. So that was the fun part. Now I get into the boring. That was like the peak. So it's all downhill from here. So the TSP program, yeah. I'm glad I spoke after the breakfast or after the break, so I hope somebody got some donuts and some coffee and got all wired up. They can sleep later. So what we're asking, or what the opportunity is for you as a private consultant that may be interested in becoming a TSP, is to help us with this process, to help us with these site-specific plans, and helping us create these plans that evaluate the objectives, that look at those resource data, that lay out different options. We heard some good options about drainage water management, but obviously that's probably not applicable or a good option for everybody. It's not applicable to all the land. So that's the kind of stuff that would be included in this planning. Laying out practices that will help water quality. So when it really comes down to, you know, it's really, yeah, we'd love to help, but we've got to eat too, which I understand that. Within EQIP, which is the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, which EQIP, in a general sense, what EQIP does is we provide incentive payments to producers to implement practices that are a part of their conservation plan. So there's a conservation plan that might have several practices or multiple practices, and some of them may get funded based on how they rank out, and then they might get an incentive payment to do nutrient management with deep placement or a water control structure or a cover crop. But within EQIP, there's an opportunity for that producer to have an incentive payment to get what we call a CAP, a conservation activity plan. And that incentive is for that producer to hire a technical service provider, a private contractor, to help them create that conservation plan to address those specific resource concerns. So really what I'm talking about, within Ohio, there's multiple caps that we can offer. There's grazing management caps, there's forestry management caps, there's caps that address producers interested in transitioning from an organic system, transitioning to an organic system, but I'm specifically here today talking about two of them. The CAP 104, which is a nutrient management plan, and the CAP 102, which is a comprehensive nutrient management plan. What's the difference? That is a very good question. And the difference, although the name and number's pretty close, that should say they're pretty close, but there is significant difference. A nutrient management plan addresses those production areas of the operation where they're applying nutrients. So their fields, essentially. Regardless of their nutrient source, it can be manure or commercial fertilizer or both. But we're going to plan activities to address water quality on those application fields and address the application of nutrient management. You know, address those applications to the 4 R's. And any other mitigating practices depending on the risk. A comprehensive nutrient management plan is something bigger. A comprehensive nutrient management plan is a plan specifically for an animal feeding operation. So an operation that has livestock in which they're collecting and storing manure. Okay? There is a component of it that has to do with the exact same thing, the nutrient management on the application fields. Again, we're going to manage the nutrients regardless of the source. We're going to do any mitigation that we need to do. But also we are going to evaluate, or the TSP evaluates and addresses the needed practices on the headquarters dealing with the collection storage of manure. Okay? Sometimes these plans... Go ahead.
What if you're storing commercial fertilizer before you're going to apply it?
That would be covered, you know, and we don't really have a cap for that, but we would do that in some of our other planning on the headquarters. But obviously, with a confined animal feeding operation, there are special concerns, you know, and especially if we think about historically speaking, you know, what we were able to do and what was done with manure in the past, you know, has changed. You know, the new laws, the new state laws, legislations have changed, and oftentimes an evaluation needs to be done to see if they have the storage, the manure storage to meet the regulatory obligation. So those are the two plans. So this really, the next slide is the high point, and then it goes down. So generally, CAP plans, again, we are paying the producer to work with the private technical service provider, but generally, based on size, and they calculate differently, whether it's a CAP 104 nutrient management plan or a CNMP, comprehensive nutrient management plan, but anywhere from 1,700 to 4,800, depending on the size, up to 3,500 to 9,500. You might say, wow, that's a big difference. You know, and it is. But there is a significant responsibility and significantly more cost incurred perhaps by the producer, because you get into some the possibility that maybe some engineering work needs to be done on the headquarters in terms of if there's new practices, you know, that you might have to have a certified engineer to help you out with those plans. So generally those costs are set nationally. They do change from year to year, or they have in the past. I don't know if they will in the future, but they have in the past. And again, only technical service providers that are certified to work in Ohio can create those caps. So now everybody's like, woohoo, man, sign me up for that gravy train, right? So now let me talk about the process, because it is a process. So what is a technical service provider? It's an individual that has the technical expertise in conservation planning. TSPs are hired, again, by the farmer to provide technical service on behalf of NRCS, but you're not really working with us. We are not hiring you. We have a contract with the producer, and the producer fulfills that contract by hiring a technical service provider. It would be no different than if we were providing an incentive payment for a grass waterway, okay, that we would have a contract with that producer to install this grass waterway to meet our specifications, but he might be contracting with someone that has the ability to move the dirt to install the grass waterway. The person that's doing that is not working for us, they're working for the producer. Each TSP will be listed on our National TSP Register website. The TSP registration and approval process requires that we certify that you've had some specific training, verifies some education, sometimes knowledge, and skills and abilities. And that's really what the certification part of the process is about, is understanding what you need to do in terms of training and how we evaluate that. And TSPs will work with the resident state, so whatever state they're the resident in, to go through this process, but the actual registration is something that is done in our headquarters in Washington, D.C., because they want it to be the same across all states. So if you live in Ohio, you would work with us here in Ohio through that process. And like if you lived in Indiana, you would work with somebody in Indiana to do that. So for CAP 102s or 104s, nutrient management plans, which are the ones that don't involve the headquarters of a confined animal feeding operation, there's two certification options. There are two options. There's a certification option and a knowledge, skills, and education. And this is where I really started cramming a lot of stuff on these slides, and it's a little bit small, but the certification option, you must be certified in one of the following. I listed the CCAs and the certified professional agronomist. There's some other certifications that are less frequent, but you have to be a certified professional agronomist in most cases. You have to take Conservation Planning Part 1, which is a training that we provide through our training, through USDA's training, Porthole Ag Learn, which the IRS people are like, woohoo, we know that. That's fun, right? So it's a training portal. It's free, but it is processed to get listed in there. You have to have a knowledge and understanding of the State Nutrient Management Conservation Practice Standard, or our 590 standard, which is how we say manure and fertilizer is applied. Basically, in Ohio, we recognize basically a 4 hours approach, and it's the right rate is the P and K, and N on wheat is the Tri-State Fertilizer Guide. The nitrogen on corn is the Economic Threshold Model, or the MRNT model that is Ohio State. We also do risk assessments, and you have to be familiar with those risk assessments: erosion calculations, erosion prediction, nutrient risk, transport risk assessments like the leaching index and the phosphorus index, and Russell 2 is our soil loss calculation. You have to provide two acceptable sample plans that meet the criteria, and they can be to document your experience and that you understand the process, and they can be emailed or sent to the resident state TSP coordinator. So the other option 2 for the nutrient management plan, you have to have a bachelor's degree or higher in agronomy or natural related resource concern and 1 year experience. All the other criteria, you still have to take the Conservation Planning Module 1, knowledge and understanding of the 590, be able to use the risk assessment, the leaching index, the phosphorus index, and Russell 2, and the sample plans are all exactly the same. So there's a certification option if you're a CCA or a professional agronomist, or an education requirement. And that's the easy one. For CAP 102, or the Comprehensive Nutrient Management Plan, again, there's two options. There's knowledge, experience, and training, and knowledge and education. Okay? So for knowledge, experience, and training, there are a few Ag Learn courses that I will talk about later because I can't fit them on this slide. Okay? And some other training opportunities for you. You have to have knowledge and understanding of the State Nutrient Management Standard, just as before, proficient in erosion prediction, basically the nutrient risk, transport, leaching index, phosphorus index. Have assisted in the development under the supervision of a certified seed employee planner for 2 years, and provide acceptable plan, one plan, to the state TSP coordinator.
Can you explain a little bit further what an acceptable sample plan is?
Hey, we have criteria, specific criteria, and you basically have to meet the criteria of that plan. So, I mean, the criteria is listed and posted. You know, our standards are posted. So it will be evaluated by resource specialist and so it has to meet the criteria. So, I mean, again, if we think about the issue, especially here in Western Lake Erie Basin, you know, the last thing we want is producers to get information that maybe isn't sound. So, I mean, this is a very serious process. I think we take this very seriously. I know you guys as retailers and private consultants, obviously by some of the things that have been done up here with the 4R certification process, take this seriously. And it is serious business. You know, I mean, we're spending taxpayer money to get a product. You know, we want a good, sound product. So, the other option is the knowledge and education. Again, you'll take the Ag Learn training that I'll list here in a few minutes. So you have to, again, have knowledge of the 590 standard, proficient in the use of nutrient management, the erosion prediction and nutrient transport factors, have a minimum of a BS degree or associate degree in agriculture or natural resources, and again, provide one sample plan. So kind of a similar approach for both CAPs. The training is significantly different. This is a significant commitment of time. But you have to take conservation planning modules 1 through 9, which part of that is Ag Learn, some of that is some face-to-face training, and part of that is your sample plan. You'll have to have an understanding of the current water erosion technology. You have to take a NRCS Ag Waste Management System, a primer, which is an Ag Learn course. You have to take Level 2, the Ag Waste Management System Level 2, which is another Ag Learn course. Air quality, climate change, and energy. Air quality, the resource concerns, which are both Ag Learn courses. There's some webinars on air quality in confined feeding operations that you have to view that are available online for free. An introduction to water quality, which is an Ag Learn course. And nutrient management modules 1 through 6, which is an Ag Learn course. So there's a few things you have to take. The training requirement is significant. So how do you do it? So the starting place where all of this is listed and the criteria is listed is on our national website, which is called TechReg, and that's the website if you want to copy it down. That's probably a good idea, but if not, if you go to Google and just type in NRCS TechReg, it'll come up first. But it's the technical service provider page that has a lot of really good information on here. Everybody's taking a picture. I was joking about writing it down because I don't know how. If I type that in, I would make like 4 mistakes at least. So this is what that website looks like. And if I have circled there, and I know it's really hard to read, it's kind of small, there's a button that says Becoming a TSP. And it takes you to a page, and there's a lot of good information, a lot of step-by-step instructions on the process. The criteria is all listed here. But let me just kind of hit some of the high points. First off, you have to get an e-authentication number, e-authentication level 2 account. So what that means is it's an application process. It's online. You type in, some general information, your name, address, phone numbers, and then there's a process at which you make an appointment at one of our local service centers, and they verify that you are who you are in person. So you got to bring some proof of ID, and there's information about acceptable ID. And basically, that is the first step. So you have to say, hey, I'm a real person. And, you have to go to a live person that works for USDA, one of the service center agencies, and say, yes, I am who I say I am. And then you begin the application process. The application process is not unlike a lot of what you would think of applying for a job. They're going to ask you about some work history, your education, training, certification, relatively straightforward. When it gets down to the training, there's a point at which you can request an Ag Learn account. This is another process in which, and again, a lot of this is kind of an email online thing, but you end up sending an email to the training officer in your resident state. They get that email, and then they actually send you a paper copy of some computer training software about how proper use of computer, because we're letting you into kind of our side of our computer system. So we don't want to expose ourselves to any malicious code, viruses type stuff. So you have to complete this training, take an assessment. After you mail it back to him, then if you pass it, you'll get a AgLearn account, and then you can schedule and take that training, complete the training process. You will submit your example plans, and then you'll complete your application. You'll submit your application. But wait, there's more. Plans will be reviewed. Basically, one of the jobs of the state TSP coordinator is kind of to assemble this package that documents that you meet the criteria. You assemble the plans, assemble any education certification. If you say you're a CCA, you're going to put your number in there. Guess what? Somebody's going to look your number up and say, yep, you're an active CCA. So we have to do all that. We submit all of that packet to our headquarters in Washington, D.C. And then there's somebody at the national office that evaluates all this information. If you meet the criteria, you become a certified TSP. And after that is criteria, then you're listed on the website, and you have the ability to provide technical services. I'm still doing okay on time. 2 minutes. That's good. So in the end, it's a process, and my conclusions, Randall's already left. So, my conclusions are, it is a process. We obviously, we all know that there's big issues out there that oftentimes, may seem, very a challenge. When you hear Kevin King and these other people that talk about it, and the reductions that we need to meet these levels is really significant. But my hope is that through your help as TSPs, through the help that we get through the districts, through the help we get through the university, through ARS and Extension and all of our partners, that we will feel like, I hope, we look at Hugh, Hammond, Bennett and say, they did do good work. They did make a difference. And I hope maybe we'll probably all be long gone, but maybe somebody will say, hey, you know what? They pulled off the impossible too.